I've been kayak fishing the same bay for nearly 9 years now. That's long enough to know the water better than I know most people. 30 feet deep off the point, shallowing out to about 15 up by the marsh grass. I've never once sounded anything deeper than 45 feet anywhere inside the mouth. It's not some remote, mysterious stretch of coastline either. It's the kind of bay where dads take their kids out on weekends. So when I tell you what my fish finder showed me that Tuesday morning, I need you to understand how completely impossible it was. Not just strange or a little unusual. Genuinely impossible. The bottom just fell away. One moment I'm reading 40 feet, the next it plunges to over 300, all within maybe 20 yards. I convinced myself the unit was glitching. I've had that happen before in shallow, weedy water. So I looped around slowly, carefully, running the same line again. The reading came back identical. Every single pass. Right there in the boat I pulled up the charts on my phone and cross-checked them against 2 other apps. Nothing. Not a contour line, not a footnote, not a whisper of anything but the usual 40-foot bottom. According to every record on Earth, I was sitting over water I'd known my whole adult life, same depth as always. I anchored on it anyway, and I want you to understand why, because I know how it sounds. It wasn't bravery or stupidity. It was just, I'm an angler. That's the whole personality at the end of the day. When you find an anomaly like that in water you've spent 9 years learning, you drop anchor. You just do. That first day nothing happened. I sat there for a while, watched the screen, felt a little foolish, and eventually went home. I came back 3 weeks later to the exact same coordinates. This time, there was something on the display. Not a bait ball, not one of those neat little arches you get from a fish. It was one solid mass, sitting low near the bottom of that 300-foot hole, barely drifting. I watched it for 20 minutes, then I packed up and went home without letting myself think about it too hard. Looking back, that feels completely insane. But it's exactly what I did. The third trip, a month later, the shape was still there. Only now it wasn't hugging the bottom anymore. It had risen about 60 feet, well within the range of anything I might be tempted to drop down there. I sat with that thought for a long time, half serious and half just playing with the idea. In the end I didn't drop a line. I told myself I wanted a friend with me before I did anything else, which felt responsible at the time. My friend Danny came out 2 weeks after that. We didn't even bother anchoring. I was just idling near the mark, showing him the shape on the finder, and there it was again, higher than I'd ever seen it. Danny went quiet. That's not like him. He's the kind of guy who fishes offshore and has pulled sharks off the beach with a hand line. He didn't say much, just, let's head in. I didn't press him for an explanation, and he didn't offer one. We were maybe 200 yards from the ramp when I noticed my anchor line. The one that had never touched the water that trip. It had been sitting coiled exactly where I'd stowed it that morning, but now it was gone off the coil, running over the side of the kayak, taut and straight down as if something on the other end was holding it under tension. I hadn't dropped it. Danny hadn't touched it. I grabbed my knife and cut that line at the cleat before I'd even finished forming the thought. Cut the line. We paddled back faster than I have ever paddled anything in my life. I still have the coordinates saved. I've never let myself go back. Danny still fishes with me all the time, but if I bring up that day he changes the subject almost before I can finish the sentence, which is strange because he's the one who originally wanted to name the spot. Now it's like the whole conversation never happened. I don't push it. I think part of him decided it's easier to just let it be a blank. Of course I looked into it afterward. Uncharted depth anomalies like sinkholes or old dredged channels are more common than people realize. I know that. I've read all the rational explanations. But here's the thing that stays with me, none of those explanations move. None of them take your anchor line when you aren't looking and hold it tight from somewhere in the dark. I've worked trawlers for 11 years now, mostly graveyard shifts. I like the water better at night, It's quieter, there's less traffic, and you learn the sound of your own boat so well that anything even slightly off registers instantly. This happened about a year and a half ago. Third hull of the night, completely uneventful up to that point. We were running the net out when something came through the finder's speaker that I simply did not have a category for. I need to be specific about that because everyone's first assumption is whale. It wasn't a whale. I've heard humpbacks come through that speaker plenty of times, and I know engine bleed from other boats when I hear it. This was either of those things. It was low, so low that I felt it in my chest before it ever reached my ears. The sound went on for 8, maybe 9 seconds, which doesn't sound like much until you're alone in a wheelhouse at 2 in the morning with nothing but that tone filling the space. The second it stopped, the screen went blank. Not glitchy, not scrambled, just completely blank, in open water, with no earthly reason to lose the bottom. It stayed that way for almost 4 minutes. I know because I stood there and watched the whole time. I remember thinking, very calmly, that I should probably wake someone up. And then I didn't do it, because I genuinely had no idea what I would even say. The screen came back on its own. We hauled the net about 40 minutes later, and the catch was completely normal. Honestly, that unsettled me more than if something had been wrong with it. Some part of me wanted an explanation I could point to, and there simply wasn't one. Except for one panel of the net. Nets tear all the time in this job. You learn what a snag looks like, a prop tear, normal wear and tear. This wasn't any of those. It was a long, clean, almost surgical opening, maybe 4 feet across, in a section that hadn't touched anything but open water on that pass. Nobody said much about it, and that silence was the strangest part of all. Deckhands love to talk. Gear damage means paperwork, and paperwork means somebody complains. But that night, everyone just quietly patched it and moved on. I brought it up the next morning with Walt. He's got 25 years on that water, taught me almost everything I know. I asked him straight out if he'd ever heard anything like that come through a hydrophone before. He didn't act surprised, and he didn't act scared either, which, somehow, was worse. He just nodded, like I'd asked him what time the tide turned, and said, "You'd get used to not asking." That was it. I pushed, asked what he meant, and he just shook his head. Said it's better for everybody if you let it go. Then he asked to be moved off graveyard shifts starting the next week, which he had never done once in the entire time I'd known him. The captain didn't even question it. I still work nights on that boat. I haven't heard the sound again, not once in a year and a half. But every time that finder screen so much as flickers, my stomach drops before my brain even catches up to why. My wife and I rented a house on a barrier island that October, off-season, cheap, mostly empty. The lowest tide of the day kept landing around 11 at night, which worked out fine because I don't sleep great and I liked walking the sandbar when it pulled all the way out. The first night I noticed a single trail of footprints already in the sand, running from the dune line straight out toward the water and just stopping at the edge where the sand turned wet. There was no trail coming back. I figured some local had gone for a night's swim, and I didn't think much of it. Second night, same trail, same path. The prints were fresh enough that the edges hadn't softened at all, which on that sand doesn't last. Wine blurs a print in an hour easy, but these looked minutes old. I stood over them with my phone light for a while, not scared yet, just curious. The third night is when it stopped being curious. I've got a bent second toe on my left foot from a bad break years ago playing pickup basketball. It healed crooked and leaves this one specific little hook mark in soft sand, something I've noticed before walking barefoot on trips over the years. I looked down at that third night's trail and there it was, the hook. Same print, same foot, same stride I'd measure if you lined my own steps up right next to it. I didn't say anything to my wife that night. I told myself I was tired, that my eyes were doing something with the shadows. The fourth night I stayed in. Didn't walk the beach at all. Kept the lights on and told myself I just wasn't in the mood. The next morning I went back at low tide and full daylight, specifically to prove myself wrong, and there was nothing there. Clean sand, rippled, like the tide had smoothed the whole stretch overnight. Except the prints from the 2 nights before had each survived a full tide cycle without smoothing at all. I finally talked to Ron, the caretaker, an older guy who'd lived there his whole life. I asked casually if people swam at night out there, and he gave me a look like he already knew exactly what I was actually asking. I pushed a little and asked if he'd come look with me at low tide. He said yes without much hesitation, like it wasn't the first time he'd been asked. We stood out there together at 11 o'clock, and the trail was back. He wasn't shocked by it, not even a little. He looked at it for a long moment, and then said, "Don't follow it past where the sand goes soft." That was the entire extent of what he'd say. I asked whose prints they were, how long this had been happening, and he just shook his head and started walking back toward the dune line. We had 3 nights left on that trip. Ron started walking that stretch with a flashlight every single one of them, without me asking and without any explanation, like it was just something that needed doing now that somebody else had seen it. I never saw the prints again after that. I don't know if it was because he was out there or because whatever it was had already gotten what it wanted from knowing that I'd noticed. We haven't gone back to that rental. My wife says she doesn't believe me, but she stopped walking the beach alone that week too. I think that says more than she'd ever admit out loud.